Will any of the couples stay together from Married at First Sight this season? Will we finally see some of these couples come together? This is what we're going to talk about this week because it was an interesting week. Just seeing some developments with some of the couples and the other ones, it wasn't. So, welcome to the Married at First Sight review. We're going to get right into the couples. We're not going to hold it up any further. Of course, we don't have to talk about McKinley and Dominique, but I think we will soon. Based on what the preview showed, we might have to talk about Max soon. But regardless, we're going to get right back into the couples. We got Christopher and Nicole. And from what I saw, I mean, it wasn't a large amount of developments between them. I would say, while they were celebrating their anniversary, a big thing that I noticed is he's not a fan of how negative she is. And a lot of the comments and self-conscious things she talks about, he's not a fan of. And I think there's some give and take. There has to be a middle ground in reference to it, in the sense that okay, this is her. She can be overly critical and she can be very hard on herself. But the flip side is, I think he cares about her and doesn't want her to be that negative. So I think he needs to learn to embrace some of the criticisms that she has and know that she's going to do that for herself. But I do understand some of his argument that, hey, don't ruin this moment by your complaining. In the sense of, hey, we're watching our wedding. You know, we're watching the day that we met, we watching the ceremony, we're reflecting. It's no need to point out the negative. Um, but she also has the right to comment on it. So like I said, I think there's a middle ground to comment, but maybe not to dwell or get too into the negative talk and negative speech about yourself. And I think that's the part that might get to him also, is just all the negative speech. He probably doesn't want his wife to do all the negative speech about herself. He probably wants her, in a positive light, uplift herself, things of that sort. So I'm not mad at him. Based on her personality, I do think they will have some problems just because she seems a bit just overly anxious about things and how things will work out. And we see some in the preview where she kind of expresses some concern that he'll wake up and just not want to be with her. So I think she has anxiety that is deeply rooted in some other things. And I think it'll come up as we continue to watch the show. So we'll see about that. The next couple we're going to talk about, and there's not much to talk about in the sense of anything negative, is Clint and Gina. And I believe they've been making a conscious effort to get to know each other and build a rapport between each other. We did see them go to a bull riding show. We've seen them celebrate their anniversary together and like trying to recreate the honeymoon that they had with the decorations and the food. And I thought that was a cool idea. I think they are actually trying to make efforts to build a relationship, build camaraderie and things of that sort. But I do agree that they do run a risk of possibly getting stuck in the friend zone. Um, so I don't know how they're going to get out of it. I do wanted to really give them credit because they started off kind of good and then they hit a bad rough patch. And we've seen from previous seasons when marriages, like this, hit a rough patch, they don't overcome it. It's usually a horrible 8 weeks to watch. Sometimes they don't even make it the whole 8 weeks. So I want to give them credit for making an effort of still trying to be around each other, still trying to get to know each other, still trying to build a dynamic and a relationship with each other. But I do think there needs to be some growth and advancement there. And I think next week, if you did see the after show, or maybe it was the little bonus show they did, they threw in another one. But we saw them have an opportunity to build intimacy where they were experimenting with the feathers and different senses of touch. And we did see something between them that could lean to them building a level of intimacy and kind of getting closer beyond the friend zone. So we will have to see what's going to come of that. But I do want to applaud them and give them credit because I think they are actually trying. They are trying to make an effort to really work on the marriage in their own way. I'm trying to figure out, do I want to talk about Airris and Jasmine or Shaq and Kirsten? Or Kirsten? I'll go to Airris and Jasmine because there's also not much to say about them outside of me not liking Airris. Watching them talk, communicate, I just don't think Airris wants to be married. I think Jasmine is really trying to make a effort. I think she's really trying to figure out what is wrong as to why he does not want to be with her. I think she is trying to run through her brain and figure out what could she do differently. And I don't think it's her. I think Airris just does not want to be married. So we did see them communicate, and I think he proposed the idea of possibly not doing anything physical or sexual until after decision day, which I get his sentiment at first, normally, in the sense of, all right, I usually have useless or not useless, meaningless sex, emotionally wise, and I don't want to just run to that and mess up what they're working on. I hear you, but in this instance, I agree. Maybe you shouldn't run to sex, but I also think you shouldn't take it off the table. I think you should really lean into intimacy in those moments and see where it leads. Because there might be an opportunity where you guys are intimate and it does seem like it's leaning in that direction. You don't want to stop it because you're sad that you're going to wait until after decision day. So I don't think that should be set in stone. I don't think it should be an automatic, hey, let's just jump in bed. But I do think it shouldn't be taken off the table in the way that it was. But I'm not a fan of Aris the way he's moving, and he's still just into these crazy questions, and I don't really know. I don't know what he dislikes about her. And like I said, maybe it's really he just doesn't want to be married. I don't know. I do think it's just odd to watch them interact and watch how he handles her. I think it's very weird. And I feel sorry for Jasmine because I think she really wants this to work and she can't figure out why it's not. So I hope we get to see some growth, something between them, just for the sake of Jasmine and her investment in the process. And last but not least, we got Shaq and Kirsten. And it's interesting to watch. Part of me feels a little sorry for Shaq because I do think he's tried to do things on her terms, trying to be respectful and understanding. And then there are moments where it start to look like it backfires. Like we saw in this episode where she said, "Hey, that she's ready for this level of intimacy. Intimacy. There needs to be this. There needs to be that." And he's like, "Well, why didn't you tell me?" She's like, "Well, why didn't you ask me?" And I feel like normally I would side with her and I could get it. And I think it's a slippery slope, and maybe I identify with the slope that he's on. That he's trying to be considerate and respectful of her space and her boundaries, and now she's ready. And I think it's hard for him because he's been trying to maneuver her so much that he's a little burnt out about it. And I think that's how we get to, well, what about me? Why is everything on your terms? Why we don't do things according to what I think or want? I think part of it is a burnout because he's trying to manage. And even from the point of her saying, well, you don't ask me. I feel like he probably does to some extent because if you think about last week's episode, in the moment they were trying to have conversation, and she's like, "Oh, there's so much to know about me. There's so much to learn." And he tried to ask questions. She was like, "I don't know what to tell you." I do believe to some extent she is hard to communicate with in the sense of he probably does ask questions. And in the moment where she has things to say, either she doesn't know how to say it and doesn't say it, or maybe she just doesn't feel comfortable having those conversations. But based on the times we've seen her, there are times where she does not want to talk, where she has no interest in the sense of being guarded and actually communicating, which I think is not helpful for him. So I don't know which side to lean on. I want to say she expects Shaq sometimes to read her mind. And I give her credit because I actually think she's been trying to make strides and improve. I think she is trying to be open to the the marriage and trying to lower her boundaries and her walls. But I think there is still a part of her that's not comfortable communicating with some of the things that goes through her mind and her heart, which is fair. But I think what is problematic and what Shaq's opinion is that he might be right is why are these things always coming up when we're in a group setting? Why is it that when they pose questions, you have things to say? And if you watch the after show, there's a clip where he says that Nicole is sliding notes under the door about things he should do. So she's talking about things, but obviously she's not talking to Shaq. So that's where part of me is like, y'all got to communicate better. Because if you're willing to talk to your girls, and if they're willing to put him on the spot, you should want him to be successful. As your husband, as him being your husband, you should want him to be successful and to fulfill your needs. And if that requires you to communicate with him before you communicate with your friends, you probably should communicate with him first. I still think they'll probably work. I just think they need to work on the communication. So those are my thoughts on the episode. The clips that they showed shows the next week might be an interesting episode. But those are my brief thoughts about this week. Let me know what you think in the comments. Let me know what you think about the show. If there are any other shows you think I should review or I should check out, please let me know. I'll take the time to watch it just to see what's going on. So let me know. I appreciate you listening. Have a great week and looking forward to talking to you next week about the episode.